We are here on the Tuesday workshop, December 5th, 2023, winding down this year, going into I think, what's going to be a fantastic 2024. And even if it's not, even if it doesn't turn out to be fantastic, wouldn't it be great to believe that we started it that way?
What can be as fantastic as we make it? Make lemonades out of train wrecks.
I think that's true. All right. Tuesday workshop. Naomi, we're discussing today what's the topic?
Breaking the glass ceiling of starting a business.
All right.
Woo!
And I just want to clarify, when you say glass ceiling, what are we talking about?
A ceiling made out of glass. You can punch it if you punch it hard enough. No, it's like the glass ceiling. That's the term that came to mind.
Okay.
I'm going to Google it for the actual vernacular. Is that the right
Well, we're not
terminology
talking
there?
specific. I guess to clarify, we're not talking specifically about women and starting businesses as though there is a glass ceiling. This is just people starting businesses, right?
I feel like we can go into the dynamic of women and starting businesses. And I actually think that there is a dynamic there, not necessarily in a what is it, feminist kind of way, but also that kind of, there's actually a culturally different thing with women and starting a business. But that's a whole different, that's comes how women are culturally raised and trained. But that's a whole different topic. So glass ceiling is exactly what I thought. An unofficially acknowledged barrier of advancement in a profession, especially, I guess it does say affecting women and members of minorities. But this is, I think, more just like becoming an entrepreneur. There's a glass ceiling, becoming an entrepreneur in general. I just barely saw that part. Sorry. So becoming an entrepreneur in general. And I think a lot of people, they don't realize they can just go out and do something. If they know how to do something and they know that it's a complicated thing and something that most other people don't know how to do, they can do it. How many maid services do you see? Like my grandmother, she had these cleaning ladies come every 2 weeks, I think, or every once a month or something, to just do the deep cleaning, cleaning the nitty gritties. There are people who are efficient at what they do. Some people it's roofing. Some people it's I have a friend who's a landscape architect. A landscape architect means that they come in, they look at the land, and they can design what would look good where. And so they can design a beautiful scenery. So it's incredible. So I think a lot of people, they think that they have to have a certain amount of schooling to start a business, but you can just start it. And you guys have, I feel like, had more experience running into people who have started businesses and been starting businesses yourselves. What have the businesses been that you've seen started, something that surprised you in the simplicity? I'm not going to put you on the spot there. Does that make sense? Does that
And
question
the
make sense?
simplicity of what the business does, or the simplicity of getting started?
Both. Either or both.
I guess probably the thing that is attractive to a lot of people in the last 10 or 15 years has been the ease of doing it online. Because of course, if you've traditionally lived in a small town, especially, and now the whole world is your marketplace, then customers are, in theory, much easier to reach, and the exchange of money for goods and services happens much more instantaneously. And it can happen at all hours of the night and all hours of the day. So if you can get it right, and you can get a product or a service out there that people really want to buy and word spreads about it, you can be making money around the clock and making money while you sleep and doing comparatively as little as leaving your house in order to do it. And I think that's probably one of the ways, and I've certainly got to know plenty of entrepreneurs who thrived in that environment. However, I wouldn't call hardly any of them a literal overnight success in a very short space of time. I would usually attribute their success to reaching critical mass after several, sometimes years or even decades of trudging along through the trenches in the shadows, not really getting a lot of attention. And then all of a sudden they strike gold. It might be intentional or it might be accidental. It's usually a combination of both. And then there's this enormous explosion of interest in what they do. And presto, you've got one of these success stories.
Mhm.
I I think it would be good to tell everybody that you can go start something, but it's not how you start, it's how you maintain and how you finish it that really matters, because a lot of people start things and don't go anywhere with it, to be candid and honest with the audience.
Thing that comes to my mind is hobby. A lot of businesses are started out of hobbies. It's something that you enjoy doing anyhow. You might as well make money at it. The glass ceiling, I think, is termed as such because it is an invisible barrier,
Mm.
right? It doesn't exist. It's just placed there arbitrarily, usually in one's own mind. And by virtue of the things that I've done and people I've been exposed to, I've heard it a lot like, oh man, I don't know how to start a business. I don't know how to start a business. The fundamentals of a business are you have a product, service, or a message that somebody's willing to pay you for, and profitable. And that doesn't even have to be profitable. It just could be like, hey, I'm just charging my buddy $2 on the weekend to bake a loaf of bread. You're not going to make any money at that. You are totally losing money, but it's business. So don't conflate this idea that that whatever you see out there, brick and mortar store, e-commerce site, distribution, warehouses, all this stuff, employees, that is a business. A business is simply product, service, or message that somebody's willing to pay you for. Ideally, they pay you more than what it costs you to do, and voila, you are making money. The fastest way to find that is a hobby that you enjoy doing, you're good at. Find people who want to pay you for that. That's the fastest, easiest way to start a business, and something that you enjoy doing. Oh, I don't know who said this, right? But if you enjoy, if you enjoy doing what you're doing, if you enjoy what you're doing, you never work a day in your life, something like that. It's a,
Well,
it's a, in some ways it's a platitude because there are parts of your business that you're never going to enjoy. You're going to hate it, but you will do what is necessary, and you will come to any ideas you can come to love that. And you might even discover your purpose through that as well. But hobby, find somebody who wants to pay you for that. That's the fastest and easiest way.
There was, I have a good friend, a former client. He's based in Las Vegas now, and he got his start. He had been, he's one of those people that you get the giggles talking to him. He's just a funny kind of character. He doesn't mean to be. He just gives off this energy that's like really, you just sort of chuckle. And he was working for the Bubba Gump restaurant, the shrimp restaurants and all that. And he got fired. And he decided, like I did after the last time I got fired, that was the end of getting hired and getting fired. From now on, I'm doing the hiring and firing. And so he struggled for a couple of years just to even figure out what to do with himself. And this is stuff that he shares, so I'm not disclosing anything. It's just, he was living off of unemployment and he was starting to drink a lot. And he said, there's got to be something I can do. By that time, he had relocated to Hawaii with his family. And he began to look around and he noticed that all Hawaiian marketing companies catered to offshore companies and tourism, right? The only companies on the Hawaiian Islands that they served were the hotels and everything to do with tourism and hospitality. So if you were a small local Hawaiian business serving actual Hawaiian residents, marketing companies completely ignored you. And he said to himself, what if I just created a postcard mailer to mail out to all the residents of this town promoting these local businesses? Get your dry cleaning done here. Go and pick up your fishing and tackle equipment here. Go and do this here, right? And he did that. He put together this postcard. He sold advertising space on it. He sold it out completely in 7 days. He made $4,000 off of it.
wow.
That was all he had to do. That was his start. It didn't end there, and it didn't balloon from there. He had a lot of work to do. But now he and his business partner have this gigantic digital marketing training platform that they teach thousands of people every year how to become digital marketers. And he basically he's living in Vegas and he's spending the majority of his time raising his 2 daughters and going to football games and all that sort of stuff. So it can be done, and you just have to be willing to do that first little thing that everybody else is, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Circling back around then to your point and the topic for today, this idea of this glass ceiling, there's nothing magical about having something that you like to do and seeing if other people are willing to pay you for that. Nothing at all. Man, woman, child.
Yeah.
And Zig Ziglar brought this up years ago. And the quote is, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help other people get what they want.
Mm.
And that is the essence of a product, service, or message that somebody's willing to pay you for. They're willing to exchange their money, some sort of value, to get what they value. They'll give you something of value, something that you value, to get what they value. You just have to figure out what they value. And that's your product, service, or message.
So why do you think then? I've got my ideas, but I'm curious, Naomi, why do you think that in a time and an age like ours where there's so much abundant opportunity, particularly with the internet, so many people are still reticent to do it? We're talking about a glass ceiling here. What do you think plays into their hesitation?
I think there's this huge culture. I think we're getting out of it now, which is incredible. But I think there's this huge culture that we're coming out of where the older generation felt like they needed to put up a front of, I know how to do this. I know what I am doing. You need to trust me. And so I think as we grow up, we think that there's going to be this point where we will know everything. And then we get to the point where, oh my gosh, I know nothing, but I have to pretend like I know things. And so I think we're getting culturally to a point where we can be like, no one knows what they're doing. We're all trying new things. We're all figuring it out. And guess what? It's okay to try and fail. That's how you learn. A lot of
Mm.
people, I feel like you see this, I think in Gen Z, is that the newest one that's happening now? Like I don't know my generations, but I feel like people are raising differently. Like for me, how I'm raising my kids is with a lot of apologizing. I'm like, I messed up today. I shouldn't have done that. I am sorry. I made a mistake. And my son still has this situation where he thinks that he has to be perfect or Santa is not going to come. Like he was singing to his brother and I was like, and if you're not perfect, Santa's not going to come. And I was like, hold on. What? No, mom, do you think your teachers are perfect? Yeah. No. No. Do you think mommy's perfect? No. No. There's this whole thing. I think that people acting professional cause it almost has this barrier. Okay. Not that you shouldn't act professional. I need to make that abundantly clear. But I think there is a way to act professional and also be transparent simultaneously. And I think people for a while, and there are some people who still do, confuse professionalism with being closed off and having this sense of you don't share trade secrets. And I think in doing so, people think that in order to become someone who is a professional, you have to know something that nobody else knows. You have to know this certain thing. And I think when starting a business, I think a lot of, even though it's not there, even though YouTube University is everywhere and free at everyone's fingertips, people still think they don't know enough because people who have the businesses have that professionalism and people mistake that as knowing something that they don't or having something that they don't when that's not true. I think it's like this, it's an illusion. It's all an illusion. Like people don't need to have that. And like I said, there's different things that went into it. And I don't necessarily think it's anyone's fault. But culturally, I think we're breaking out of that. And culturally, I think we're starting to break that glass ceiling. But I still think there's that little bit of hesitation where people assume it's pre-imposter syndrome, if that makes sense.
Jason, what do you say? What's the data there and it's inhibiting people?
I don't think it's I don't think it's uniquely this generation. I think it is a generational idea uh, along the path of maturity that says the people before me didn't know anything. And yet the people before you built everything that you're using. And it's a logical fallacy in many regards to think that somehow we have stumbled upon something new and better, We've stumbled upon something new and different, but people are fundamentally the same. And so the idea that we can't do something like this, getting this idea of the glass ceiling, the idea that we can't achieve, it might be a cultural belief, but it's not unique to this. I don't think it's uniquely a generational thing. The in fact, I think some of it's because we have the ability to communicate things so quickly that we communicate things that are not true. So, for instance, I just typed into you'd ask, "What's the name of this current generation?" And I was like, "I don't know." So I typed it into Google Bard, an AI, a transformation engine, which simply takes the universe of stuff that it can see out there on the internet and then combines it all together to produce a response. And I asked it, "What is the name of the current generation?" And here's what it said. The current generation is called Generation Alpha. It is the generation of children born after 2010. It is the first generation to be entirely born in the 21st century and the third millennium. All factually true. And then they are also the most diverse generation in history, with over 50% of them being non white. One might think that is a true statement. Unless I'm totally mistaken, I think it's also bullshit because it 50% of them being non white, that is a uniquely Western statement.
No.
Over 50% of the entire population of the world has been non white for all of history. I'm like, that doesn't make any damn sense just from the population of the world and where people come from. So so it's interesting that we, uh, this idea of if we don't learn from history, we're bound to repeat it, something like that, right?
Hmm.
Each generation, I think, suffers from the immaturity of not having enough information or enough life experience, something like that. And and like I have received some stuff from I have a son and well, I have a couple sons, but uniquely there's the son of mine and he was taking exception with some things. And I, like you took Naomi, I took the path of some of these things. Yeah, that's true. I probably owe you an apology for some of these things. And then I said, and then some of these things, you need to talk to me in 20 years because what you're saying is you're just 20 years behind on life experience. And you'll find out in 20 years that this is not, you probably won't believe this statement once you live some.
Mm.
And, so I think that I don't think, I think it's a generation maturity issue that every generation suffers from. Our parents, they grew up in a time when all of a sudden you could dance in a certain way. And yet we think that was like a sexual revolution. Unwind even further, and there was risque music that was clearly sexual in nature that was produced in the early 1900s. You can unwind it further back and you get all sorts of stuff that was readily acceptable that we in our culture would say, "Well, you can't do that." It might even be illegal, like prostitution's illegal. Okay, that's fine. But there are whole sections of cities designated for that activity that have been around for hundreds or thousands of years
Yep.
in across the world. And so I do think that I think the belief, the certain beliefs are just it's for lack of information, lack of maturity, lack of experience, lack of figuring out what's a principle that should be lived by versus what's a belief that's transit in nature. That's my no, I'm those are all my those are a lot of my thoughts around this topic, which gets back to the idea of the glass ceiling. It's been true for all of eternity. What you focus, what you see, what you're looking for. So
Yep.
if you keep looking, I'm not qualified. Sure enough, you're not qualified. Nobody can tell
Yeah.
the difference. It's fine. I
Whether you
cannot
can,
overcome a belief that you hold.
yeah, whether you can or you can't, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are completely right.
Yeah, and like back to the Zig Ziglar quotes, he's got this great quote that says, "Lack of direction, not lack of time, is the problem. We all have 24-hour days." All right, so if you're not achieving what you're, and I know this to be true, the times when I've achieved so little is I didn't know where to go.
Uh-huh.
And now we have in this generation, not even Generation Alpha, but in the generation before, who is communicating all over social media. It's like we are bombarded with all sorts of things we could do. And so then we don't know what to do. And we're also told we have to discover some purpose that makes our souls come alive. Okay.
Much
Good luck
pressure.
with that. It's a lot of pressure.
Just not achievable.
I've got a 17-year-old daughter who's trying to figure out what she's supposed to be doing for her job. 17, because it's on, and she has one voice telling her that she needs to go to college. And then she's got me who's saying, no, you should take some time off and figure out what you want to do and just to enjoy the world,
My
Mm.
parents
explore
were
this
not
world because you
okay.
don't know enough. You've been sitting in Northern Illinois for too long,
Mhm.
and we're a reasonably well educated and well traveled family. So she knows where she could go and she believes that she's capable of it. Great, fine. Now go off and do something. Just do anything and you'll
Mhm.
figure it out.
Yeah.
My parents were not happy when I told them I didn't want to go straight into college. I'm like, okay, for someone with ADHD who has literally learning handicaps, it's a struggle to learn in a classroom. I do hands-on. That's why my first ever quilt that I made got third place in an international quilt competition in my division because I was learning on the job. I am a hands-on learner. I am literally a hands-on learner. I did great in music, in theater, in sewing. Like I did great because I learned hands-on. College, it's not. I guess there's some classes, sure. There's always some classes, but I was like, hey, being forced into, if you count grade school plus kindergarten plus 2 years of preschool, was that 14 years? No, hold on. 12, 13, 14, 15, 15 years of involuntary school. And then you're thinking and it was miserable for me to try and learn in that environment. And you're thinking that I'm like acting like I'm going to go and my life is going to get thrown away because I don't want to go straight into more of that. I still haven't gone to college. I actually ended up meeting my husband and getting married pretty soon after that. And he deployed, we started a family. That kind of all happened. But there's this whole thing where you don't have to go to college. You don't have to get a higher education to be successful. There are things that you do need to go to college for and you get a higher education to. And if that's what you love, do it. There are people who want to help people and become a medical professional. That requires a lot of schooling. You have people's lives literally in your hands. Yeah, go to college. Like there are certain things that you need that education for, but it's not something that you don't need to have a degree to know enough to be successful in what you want to do with your life. And you don't have to decide right away. And you can start something and sell that company and start something new.
I'll
You
tell you,
don't have to commit to anything. Oh, that was sorry. One more quick thought. I read a book. Oh, I forget what it was called. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
yeah,
And this author, she said, I loved this quote so much. 100% doesn't mean forever. Commitment doesn't mean forever. Committing to something doesn't mean you stick with it forever. It means you give it 100%. That's what commitment means. If you give something 100% and it's no longer yielding those results, walking away, knowing when to walk away from a company or a friendship or a relationship, being committed to it, like the whole idea that you're not committed unless you stick with it forever, it's crap. And so like when you're choosing a field to go into, you give it 100%, you see it through, you learn everything you can about it. And if you're giving it 100% and it's not what you thought it was, you have permission to change your mind. It doesn't mean you weren't committed.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Jason?
I don't remember,
I'm so sorry.
but no, I think that was good. My thought on what you just said, this idea of 100% commitment, brings me to a thought I was batting around Paul earlier, which is tomorrow never comes. It's only today.
Yeah.
That's all we have. It's today
Oh, that's good.
because, right? Because tomorrow is just today. And so we make down payments on a future that doesn't exist all the time. Mentally, we make a down payment. We're like,
Mhm.
I'm going to commit some of my now energy to tomorrow, which when we look at being 100%, I wrote at one point in time, this idea of work-life balance is nonsense because it's, I suggest wherever you are, just be all in on that. So
Mhm.
like right now we're in the workshop. I'm all in on the workshop. I'm 100% on this workshop. I'm going to drop this workshop. I'm going to be 0% later because I'm going to be 100% in on wherever I'm at that moment. Now, if we stack those things up, if we today are taking care of the things that we need to take care of, then tomorrow, when it becomes today, is taken care of as well. We are setting up ourselves for success tomorrow. And I think sometimes when we're talking about, let's say, relationships, if we're not 100% in today, we are not setting ourselves up for success tomorrow. In which case, we then start to erode that value. It's the barn that never gets painted. It's out in the elements. That barn will eventually fall down. It may take it 100 years, but that barn is coming down and will be unusable much sooner than that. And I think sometimes we treat the things that we want to do like that barn. We then say, this is glass ceiling. I can't achieve it. No, none of that is true. Historically, certainly none of that is true. What you're saying is not true. You are making an excuse for why the barn came down. The wind blew. No, that's not why the barn came down, because you didn't paint it 10 years ago. And you didn't paint it 10 years before that. You didn't paint it 10 years before that. And you stopped using it. You stopped going. That I think, the idea of like luck favors the prepared. Whoever said that, Ben Franklin or something like that.
Also,
all these things we see come into existence. Hey, they got this business. Yeah, they did that in their garage beforehand. Apple started in the garage. Started with a small loan, putting this stuff together. Started with a guy named Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. And nobody thinks about Wozniak. He was in a lot of ways, the brain child behind some of this stuff. He was the techie, hands-on guy, and he looks and acts like that. Steve Jobs was this charismatic leader who said crazy things. You need them both, right?
Mhm.
But I think never despise small beginnings. We all have some small beginning. If you commit 100% to that today, it's going to set you up for better success tomorrow. And you're going to commit 100% when that becomes today and that moment. It's going to set you up better success. And that will parlay into what we see as this grand business. Back to your book, begin, feel a fear, do it anyway. John Maxwell says, build your wings on the way down. Just jump and build your wings. It's the people who do, the people who don't. That's the difference. And so I think the glass ceiling, if you want to do something, don't make excuses for tomorrow. It's not here and it's never coming.
And what all of this has got me thinking of is that for most people, history began the year they were born. Right. So I was born in 1980, and therefore, prior to that, irrelevant. No, quite the opposite. It's not irrelevant. As a matter of fact, there was a time before the Industrial Revolution where widespread, readily available employment was not a thing, where you didn't look up on job boards or classified ads or anything like that. You learned to work based on what the small community around you actually needed. And usually you learned that because you were born into a family where your father worked in that trade. And so you learned that trade. That's how it was for hundreds and hundreds of years until the Industrial Revolution came along. As a mentor of mine likes to say, industry and technology simply mask how little human nature has changed. And here's what I'm getting at by saying we of the English-speaking world bear a lot of last names that stem from occupations, right? A smith was somebody who swung a hammer and nailed metal and flattened out steel, right? That's smith. That's where that name comes from. Tailor was somebody who sewed and knitted your clothes and adjusted your robes and hemmed in your garments and all of that, right? We have several other names like the hunter was a woodsman who went out and killed pesky animals that threatened the community. The Jewish communities, wherever they went, they adopted names like that. Waterman was somebody who brought you your water, because in those days you didn't have running water in your household. You had to have it brought to you. There was one Zucker, might have been, it's a German name, but in English that would mean printer. That was the person who operated the printing press in town. And people would give themselves these names to distinguish themselves, because there was a time where you didn't even have a last name. You're just Jason, Paul, and Naomi. Which Jason, Paul, and Naomi are we talking about? Oh, Jason, the business coach, Paul, the publisher, Naomi, the life coach. Oh, okay. So you started calling your associates in your community by their last name to distinguish them, but their last name was usually connected to their occupation. And the reason for that was you didn't have widespread companies hiring, posting jobs on boards. You had to make do with what you had. And so most people in those days, believe it or not, were actually self-employed, which is to say the cycle repeats itself. So if you're now listening to this, considering punching through the glass ceiling to become an entrepreneur and leave behind the 9-to-5, the W-2s, and working for the man and so forth and so on, you're not doing anything new. You're actually doing something that has been done for centuries, millennia. It is how you make yourself useful to your fellow human beings. If you're looking now and you're saying, I've got this comfortable, secure job that every 2 weeks I get paid and all that, for as long as it's worth and as much as you enjoy it, that's great. But don't be under any illusions that it's permanent and unchanging. I don't care if it's even the US Post Office. Don't be under the illusion that it's not going to change, because it does. There were staples in industry that were gigantic when we were kids that are completely gone, right? The one company I was thinking of that was extremely popular when I was in elementary school was a company called Rubbermaid. Rubbermaid manufactured dustpans and brushes and trash cans and all these little waste paper baskets and a whole bunch of household products. Completely gone. They don't exist anymore.
Really?
Compaq.
I still call them Rubbermaid containers.
They actually used to be a household brand that you picked up at stores like Target and Kmart and all that. Kmart is gone, right? Vanquished, gone forever.
Back to the to your Kmart example, I saw an ad today from 1995 that Kmart had electronic solutions, and it was a touchscreen kiosk in their store where if you're browsing the televisions on the wall, if you want to see the additional stock that they had, you could go to this touchscreen and you could see their electronic catalog and go purchase it from there. And Kmart was unable to make the transition to the internet and did not see the Amazon shopping stuff coming. And so this idea of 100% in, it's a cause. I think what you're talking about is cause and effect. Just because you're 100% in does not mean that it is forever.
Yep.
Now, there might be some things, some ideals where really probably should be forever, because that's where the best value is extracted, like a relationship. We talk about, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, right? He talks about relationships and particularly marriages. One of the benefits of marriage is that it is a forever contract. You have to figure your shit out. You must figure it out. And if you don't figure out, it's not like it figures itself out. So you are confronted with this opportunity to address the things in your life that need to be addressed. And the best way to do that is in a relationship where you're like, listen, we either hightail it out and it's expensive emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually, or we figure it out. And the benefit of figuring that out is massive. And the cost of not figuring out also massive. Now, just because you're 100% in doesn't mean this idea of takes two to tango. Just because you're 100% in doesn't mean somebody else is 100% in. And so you can be all in. You can be all in on your business. I'm sure there are people at Kmart all in on their business. So whoever made that kiosk thought they were a genius. And they probably were at the time. But they didn't make the transition, and it doesn't exist anymore. Kmart's everywhere now are being converted into, at least in my area, being converted into self-storage. and self-storage is a great business. So there are certain generational changes, like self-storage wouldn't have been a thing 100 years ago. Nobody needed
Mhm.
self-storage on every corner. Now we got so much stuff
Right, so much junk.
constantly. Now
Booming
we have to
business.
store our stuff
Yep.
that we never look at. So there are some generational changes. So just because you're 100% in doesn't mean it's going to be forever. And yet, if you're not 100%, it's certain it's not going to be forever, or it's certain to never come. Moving back to the glass ceiling idea of starting a business,
Mhm.
making starting with that business is very simple. Product, service, or message that somebody's willing to pay you for.
Yeah.
How do you figure out if somebody's willing to pay you for it? There are steps to do that. Are you courageous enough to make those steps? That's really where it comes down to. Are you courageous enough to look past all of the things that are standing in your way, of which you've mostly made them up in your mind, to assess whether people will exchange value for that product, service, or message? If you can do that, you can have a business. The rest is paperwork.
My
I
go ahead, Naomi.
Thank you. I really love what you were mentioning about it takes two to tango. Like you need a system, a team. You need a team in order to grow, I think. Yeah, it takes two to tango, but it only takes one unchecked hole in a ship for it to sink. It only takes one unmendable hole to sink a ship. That's it. Well, it takes one iceberg. It only takes one hole to sink a ship. Like what you were saying, like if someone's not on board, if you have someone on your team who will not be on the team, they're on the team, but they will not choose into the team. They won't get on board with what needs to happen. They're not a team player. It will sink it. And so that also comes, I think that also could add to that glass ceiling of starting a business. A lot of times people could be, and this is to the point that I think, Paul, you were talking about a few weeks ago, someone who is not for you. If you're in, I think a lot of times the glass ceiling might even come from the people around us where there might be something about starting a business, but if one person on our team isn't for us in the same way that we want, like that is needed in order for us to move past that, that could be what that glass ceiling is, whether it's a family member, a friend, social media, these ideas, someone who's not for you. All it takes is one hole to sink a ship, and it could be the ship of an idea, breaking that glass ceiling of starting a business. So it takes two to tango. It takes everyone on your team to be for you and for that idea. So you need to be very choosy about who's on your team when you want to move forward with something. Who's in your business team, who's in your support team, so choosing those teams is essential because you need the right team for the right situation in order to move forward because all it takes is one hole to sink a ship. And so you need to make sure that you have that team wisely.
My
That makes
newest
sense.
value, personal value that I came up with recently was interdependence with the right people.
Mm,
And there's a whole subtext I could go into that. I don't know if it's really the best thing to go into right now, but it's basically, yeah, you will rise and fall on the strength of your relationships, but more importantly, you will rise and fall on the strength of the right relationships because some relationships look adversarial, and that's actually a good thing.
yeah.
Other ones appear very much champion, supporter, cheerleader because they're illiterate about what you're getting into. They mean when they actually help you go fight bravely and die quickly. And so, um, Jason and I have been kicking around some ideas about that too, just in terms of how do we get people to understand that it's great to have good, healthy relationships, but even more than that, you need good, healthy relationships with the right amount of perspective and experience and ability to speak intelligently to what you're up to, which I think is what part of in the early days though, which what I would say, referring back to my friend and my client in Vegas, who I talked about earlier, he distilled this into a really simple format and he called it the milk it method. And he said basically milk is an acronym, MILK, and stands for market, idea, launch, ka-ching. And harkening back to the story I shared where he created that postcard, he identified a hungry market. Local Hawaiian businesses totally overlooked and ignored by marketing firms in Hawaii. So they either have to find a company on the mainland who's going to help them, or they got to do their own marketing and they don't know how to do it. So that's a hungry market that needs what he could offer. Then his idea, right? Postcard, mail it out to all the residents and tell them they get 25% off if you bring this coupon in, right? Like I think. So that was his idea. He went and showed it to people and they're like, I'll buy it. So then that was his launch. Took 7 days to launch it, sold it out, made $4,000. That's the ka-ching, right? It can be as simple as that. Not everybody can do it that way, right? Some people are real artisans and snobs like me who have to have it done a certain way. And if it's not done a certain way, we don't like it, right? But there are people who can just plow through a generic idea like that. It's a cash crop. It gets you motivated. It shows you don't need to depend on the man. And if you understand the principles you just followed to get to that, you can repeat that and repeat it and build up cash flow and recurring revenue and get to a point where you're completely self-employed and paying your own way.
One of the things that comes to my mind as we're talking this through is when you're starting a business, know why you're starting that business. Because if you, let's say, align yourself in, Paul, your words, interdependence, you become interdependent in the wrong people. That can sap your energy. It'll sap your energy faster than it'll sap your business.
Yep.
You will lose energy almost immediately. Your business will follow. The thing that will keep you alive is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And that's true when headwinds come. Let's say you are interdependent on the right people, you're still going to encounter headwinds. There will be changes in your marketplace, things that you didn't know about, things that you miscalculated. I ran a successful e-commerce business for some period of time and wrote 1 million lines of code while I was there. And we were delivering, and ultimately when I sold it, we were delivering from 8 distribution centers and a national network of 30,000 contractors. Now I've got that whole speech. I know how to give that little speech. I also know that behind the scenes, I laid off the staff, 80, 90% of the staff twice, maybe even 3 times. Can't remember. I think it was at least twice. One of them was a year after we hired 8 salespeople. We were making money hand over fist. We had a whole launch event and at a hotel and brought everybody in for interviews and then hired a bunch of people, put them all on the phones and then miscalculated the seasonality of some of the products that we were selling. Overnight, sales just dried up and we thought, oh my gosh, it's competition. Who's out there? What's happening here? Are we not? It's no, actually the temperature changed and people don't buy heating and air conditioning at that time of year. Like they don't buy it. They just stop overnight and it destroyed the business. We laid everybody off back to just 3 of us on the phones and maybe 4 of us on the phones. And it set us back significantly. But we knew that this was a good business. We knew we could make money. We had a short but very profitable track record. We knew we scaled too fast, too quickly. We knew we didn't understand the seasonality. We corrected for those things, but we were 100% in that moment and knew, based on a short period of history, we knew that it would pick up again. And that commitment to today enabled us to have the courage to lay people off and swallow a big pill on that, a big humility pill, get back on the phones, go back to where we started. Here's what we know works. Boom. Begin again. Only now with a lot of product, a lot of technology, a lot of stuff ready to help us. And then hire more slowly in the future. Great. Learn the lesson, learn it quickly, and move on. We were interdependent on the right people. We got rid of the people that were not the right people for the right time due to no fault of their own in some cases, and began again because we knew why we were doing this. We knew why we were committed to that opportunity.
Yeah.
And it paid off well. paid off very handsomely.
You were not necessarily the way you would have wanted it to happen, but you were adjusting to a reality there, which I think is very important if you're going to cross through the glass ceiling. Reality is going to present itself often in ways you're not looking for it or expecting it. Particularly the more of a toxic optimist you are. In other words, not willing to look at reality. If you're the type of person who says, the numbers will look after themselves, I don't need to worry about that. Or as we like to tell people, I'll just publish the book and it'll sell itself. No, it doesn't work that way, cousin. So you have to be ready for reality, but you can overcome that too. In other words, yeah.
Yeah.
The worst that could happen is you do have to go back and get a job, but at least then you go back and get the job knowing I gave it a good shot. I gave it a try. I went out there and took a risk and I did something with my life.
So I would add in this and I know this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but let's say your life can be built on 3 stools. There are 3 legs to a stool, right? Sitting on that stool, 3 legs hold that up. Your health, minimum of 3 legs. Can't do it on 2. Your health, spiritual, physical, emotional health, your close relationships, not your distant relationships, not your third cousin or the people on the internet, your close relationships, those people you are actually interdependent on in your personal life, if you want to call it that. And then your work.
Mm-hmm.
If you have those 3 things together, minimum, and you can add more to it for sure. But if you have those 3 things together, you can be fine. Now, if you're going to start a business, the last thing you should do is mess with your health or your close personal relationships.
Yeah.
Because if you take 2, now you're on a balancing act. 3, you can sit down and rest. 2, balancing act. 1, now you have a serious balancing act, and you're probably going to fall over.
Isolation.
You're going to need,
and
means you're going to need
darkness.
to start putting a whole new stool together. You're going to have to set it back up, and everybody's going to look at you from across the way, or you at least feel like they are, and they go, "Oh my God, he fell off this stool." Yeah, I did. What's it to you? You get all
got it on video. It's on YouTube now.
Right? There's a whole dynamic around it. But when you're starting a business, recognize maybe where you're getting that glass ceiling from. Is it, where's that coming from? And is it going to affect those 3 things? Because you're going to take that job thing and you're going to have to balance for a while, which means you're going to need a really strong health. You're going to need really strong close relationships. If either one of those things are against you, pause for a moment and just keep the stability of a job. Because when you have a product, service, or message and somebody wants to exchange value for it, you're messing with one of those legs of the stool. And don't confuse the fact that you think that this business isn't working, when in fact it might be that you don't have this full support of your close relationships, or maybe your health is suffering for some unknown reason, right? Your emotional health, mental, spiritual, physical.
Usually that's connected with the close relationships.
It is, right?
Times,
They are, and that's why I bring up those 3 things. Those, you tug on one, you pull the others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when you're looking at starting a business, for one, the glass ceiling it's not there. Maybe you don't have something that you really care enough about to focus on, or you're unwilling to test. You don't have the courage to test whether somebody wants to exchange value. And then 3, you've got these 3 legs of the stool. Assess those, really dig in and figure out, am I ready to begin the balancing act while that one leg of that stool is being built and becoming stable?
Yeah, I love that. Also, I wanted to build off what Paul mentioned just now, the optimism that can mess you up. Make sure your optimism is relentless and not reckless.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to have optimism going forward, and it has to be relentless. It cannot be yielding. But people, I think, mistake relentless optimism for reckless optimism. And they think that if they keep being optimist, if they just dig in, this is what they committed to, they're going to be optimistic, it's all going to resolve itself. That's reckless optimism. Relentless optimism is, today we're going to need to lay off this much of our staff. But it's going to be okay because we have a plan. Here's what we're doing. We're going to be okay.
I love that.
And here's another one. I know we're dwindling here. The level of experience, I think I started when I was 38 and I'm 43 now. And what I've learned as a product of going through it the way I've gone through it could not have been taught to me when I was 38, because I didn't think this was going to turn out this way when I was that age. I was after some very different concepts in my mind of what I thought it was going to look like, which is to say, if you think you can learn this from a guru, you're wrong, because you have to live that guru's experience in order to have it turn out the way he or she did. Now, do they teach business principles that apply in all situations? Absolutely. Don't be afraid to do this and incur your own battle scars and incur your own failures, because you can't have other people's successes and you can't have their failures either. And you can't have the experience that they have and the hindsight that they have, the unique way they have it, without going through everything they went through to get there, which is, we all know, is impossible. When you hear the people say things, there's no shortcuts to be taken, that's what that means. It's not that, do people make millions of dollars overnight in some cases? Yes, they do. Yeah, not very often, but yes, they do. There are overnight
Can happen.
successes.
Elizabeth Holmes. Just kidding.
But for the most part,
Too
I love
soon,
to go.
Amy, too soon.
I love to go back to the example of how they used to talk about Marilyn Monroe, who, if anybody could be an overnight success, looking at the way she was portrayed and depicted, you would think it's her. Not really. But the whole story was she was sitting there in a diner one day, just minding her own business, and some Hollywood scout walked by and said, "You ought to be in pictures, lady." No, that's not really how it happens. What was more likely happening was she was going to one audition after another. She was taking parts anywhere she could get it. She was taking non-speaking parts, working in commercials, and then she got discovered.
Mhm.
And she made a lot of mistakes along the way. And she continued to make a lot of mistakes even when she became successful, as we know. Let your journey, love your journey, as Jason would say, and embrace your own failures. Expect them, and when they happen, treasure them, because they will teach you what not to do going forward in a way that uniquely applies to you, that you can't forget.
Play
Eddie
through your
can't-
losses.
Yes. Sorry, say that again, Amy.
Play through your losses. I play a video game. It's a piracy video game, and there's this thing where you can opt in to play another player and sink their ship. And I'm used to losing most of the time because I'm terrible at PvP. I battle the NPCs. Okay, that's what I like to do. That's where I can predict their moves. But I'm getting better at PvP because I've been opting into this PvP mode more. And I think in breaking that glass ceiling of business, you have to play through your losses. Don't expect to win if you check all the boxes of starting a business. You need to realize that you're going to be learning a lot. You're going to be falling on your face a lot and be like, okay, time to keep going. Time to do another one. Oh, I sunk again this time. Okay, maybe next time I won't, but I'm going to keep going. Play through your losses.
There are a handful of times that, at least, that notable people, have remarked on how long it takes to become an overnight success. It was Eddie Cantor, who was born in 1892, who said it takes 20 years. It takes 20 years to make an overnight success. Steve Jobs said, if you look really closely, most overnight success takes a long time. Jeff Bezos said all overnight success takes about 10 years. Everybody has some concept. After they've become a success, they have some concept of how long it took. And looking into it, if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, hey, if you knew what it was going to take, would you have done this again? You're like, no, not a chance. And that's a benefit that we have. And that's the idea of one of the hallmarks of being an entrepreneur is you have to be optimistic. But I love what you talk about. Don't be reckless in your optimism, but do be relentless. Everything works out better if we have a positive attitude versus a negative attitude, and give 100%. I would also say that anything that is of high value probably comes with heat or pressure. The things of highest value have a process of being refined, probably through heat or pressure, and people are no different. And too often, people who complain, we look at the one side of it, complain about, hey, I'm not an entrepreneur, I didn't start that business, that didn't happen for me. They wanted it to be easier because we live in a culture of easy. I want this to be easy. It's not going to be. because if it's easy, it's not high value.
But you can
And
enjoy it if it's not easy. Enjoyable doesn't
oh,
mean easy.
you got to
I
love the
think a lot of people,
process. If you're going to be an
yeah,
entrepreneur, you better love the process of
Mhm.
creating that. If you
yeah.
don't love the process, certainly don't get involved with being an entrepreneur. Go get a job and have somebody tell you what to do.
Mm.
That will be easy than doing the other thing, but you can create a tremendous amount of value uh, if you're willing to go through the heat and the pressure. But know why you're doing it. And I love this idea of relentless optimism, and then keeping an eye on those three skills. Naomi, this was your topic. What else? How do you want to wrap this up? We're approaching our, I think, our hour.
What did you just say? You just barely talked about something. I was going to build off it for a sec. I'm missing it. Oh, heat and pressure. The best way to become sparkly and shiny like a diamond is to hop into that refiner's fire. And you can't, people enjoying themselves and the hard work they're doing. Oh, that's what I was going to mention. That glass ceiling, you have to be willing to play through your losses to get there. People enjoying it doesn't mean that it's easy. And when, and being relentlessly optimism doesn't mean you're reckless. Don't be reckless in your optimism. Play through your losses. And overnight success just means that people noticed it and it got attention overnight. It doesn't mean the success came overnight from when the work started. The work started years ago. The attention happened overnight. Overnight was people actually finally realizing that person, what they were doing had value. And that person knew years before everyone else did. The overnight success is overnight attention, not success. They've been in the refiner's fire for a long time before the spotlight was shined on them. Success isn't the spotlight. Success is refining yourself through that refiner's fire and being willing to play through your losses. And that glass ceiling has everything to do with whether or not people are going to hop on board and give you that attention when you first start in that refiner's fire. People are going to be worried about you when you hop in that refiner's fire, but you're not going to become who you need to be without going.
Love it. We are at the end of this Tuesday's workshop where we're discussing the glass ceiling, whether it exists or it doesn't exist, and how one might look at that glass ceiling. And when thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, Naomi, a fantastic topic, excellent discussion. I love
Thank you.
this. I'm sure it's going to be high value for all of our viewers and listeners. If you are an aspiring or current entrepreneur who needs a support system to start, run, or grow your business better, check out the community at Think Business Accelerator, where we help faith-based entrepreneurs change the world, transform your little corner of the world. And also catch the Chronic Noob. I want to give a shout out. Naomi has
I
a
need to start it back up.
podcast, a
It's on
video cast
hiatus.
called The Chronic Noob, where she explores all of the things related to light and working through today, the stuff of today. And then also check out Emissary Publishing with Paul Edwards, where he helps uh, entrepreneurs and other folks tell stories that matter.
Like your book in the background there. Come here, Jason.
Yeah, and Paul's book. You want to mention it?
Yeah, which you can get anywhere fine books are sold for only.
This is great. I enjoy both
The
of you.
plugs.
Thank you so much for joining us on the workshop, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you so much, you guys.